Well, Parliament's Budget Officer, Yves Giroux, is with me now in the studio. Good to see you again. Thanks for being here. This is your second analysis of the federal carbon tax. The first was less than a year ago. Why did you want to re-examine this?
Well, we wanted to publish an update to last ones because since then a couple of things have changed. For example, Alberta is now under the federal backstop regime as a result of the provincial government decision to withdraw their own provincial regime. So in effect, it places them under the federal regime. The second aspect that changed is New Brunswick has now decided to implement their own provincial carbon pricing regime. So they will be out of the federal regime as of April 1st. The other thing that happened, we have updated data from StatsCan, the Canada Energy Regulator, as well as Environment and Climate Change Canada. And finally, we wanted to include the impacts of the federal carbon pricing regime on sales taxes, which we did in this report, but didn't do last time around.
Right, and that does, as we'll find out, that does change the calculation a little bit, right? Yes. So it's worth talking about. But let's start with sort of the, and you're not to be a political animal. I'm not going to ask you to do that, but I want you to weigh in on the political conversation that's taking place. The federal government's case is that the vast majority of Canadians will get more money back from this system in federal rebates than they pay in additional fuel costs because of the carbon tax, even people in Alberta. That's the government's case. Yes. Is that true?
Based on the data that we have and the analysis that we did, yes, it is the case. So on average, people in virtually all quintiles, all income groups, except for the highest income earners, they'll be receiving more in rebates than what they'll end up paying through the federal carbon levy.
Okay, why is that? Why is it different across some incomes? I think I know the answer, but let's have you tell us.
Well, it's because people with higher income, they tend to be bigger households.
More heating costs?
More heating costs, bigger houses. They tend to have bigger cars, obviously, drive more kilometers in a year. So, and they consume more, generally speaking, and hence consume more of carbon-intensive goods and services. So, therefore, they're expected to pay more, on average, in carbon levy.
Right, and or bigger families as well, if there are more members of a household, for instance. So, are you able to calculate at what point, at what income level that flips? At what income level do you go from making more in a rebate than you're paying in carbon tax versus paying more than you're actually getting back?
It depends on the province. Generally, it's between the fourth and fifth income quintile. So off the top of my head, it's about $130,000 per year of income, but it varies again. Per household, right. Yes. And it varies across provinces depending, for example, if a province, if the electricity grid is mostly fed by fuel, fossil fuel, or whether it's mostly fed by renewables, for example. So it has an impact. And as I said, it's an average for income quintiles. It doesn't mean that everybody in that same income quintile is going to pay more or less. You can have big differences across in the same income range, depending on specific circumstances of the household.
But even when you consider all that, your conclusion is still that the majority of Canadians are getting more in the rebate than they're paying out in carbon taxes.
Yes.
Okay. You also note the amount of money Canadians are getting back in the provinces that are subject to the federal backstop is going to be less than you actually projected last year. How come?
It's because last year we wanted to ensure that the comparison we did was the analysis we did was going to be comparable to what the government had published at the time. So it did not include the impact of sales taxes. This year, based on feedback we got after last year's report, we decided to include the impact of sales taxes, the GST and HST, as well as provincial sales taxes. And that's one of the reasons why people on a net basis will receive slightly less than based on last year's report, once you factor in the impact of GST on goods and services that will be slightly more expensive.
And is there are you able to say, put a dollar amount on slightly, or again, does that vary province to province? Or?
Again, it varies across provinces.
But is it a ballpark? Is it $10,
it's
20, 40, 50?
It's about a 3% different in the gross cost, so it's not a significant, or it's not a material impact. It's still, every dollar counts, but it's not like humongous amounts.
The other claim that the federal government has made through all of this is that the federal carbon tax is revenue neutral. Is that true?
We have taken that at face value, and that's based on that assumption that we have developed these estimates. But the government has been pretty consistent in saying that it will return 90% of the proceeds from the fuel charge to households. I'm sure that if they were to deviate from that, they'd pay a very heavy price in terms of public outcry. So we have used that as one of our assumptions.
All right. Parliamentary Budget Officer Yves Giroux, always good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.